Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Discriminating Gamer. You know, I recently had a peekaboo accident.
A peekaboo accident? How bad was it?
I had to go to the ICU.
That son of a.
Ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to go ahead and take a look at 7 empires from Rio Grande Games. In 7 empires from Rio Grande Games, 2 to 6 players take on the roles of shadowy figures trying to influence European politics over the course of the 18th century. Now, I'm not going to get too deep in the rules, but I am going to give you a bit of a rules overview here and tell you what I think. Now, when you're setting up the game, you're going to go ahead and set out kind of influence cards in along the flag section of the board for the appropriate countries. Now, these influence cards go from nobles who are very powerful to, down to the bourgeoisie, which are less powerful and few in between, like clergy and what have you. And they have number values on the top of them. You're also going to take worker cards and just kind of set them off to the side for each country. Then what you're going to do is you have a number of decades over the course of the century, and you're going to get tiles and mix them up, place them face down, and that's going to tell you how you're going to gain influence and maybe do some other things over the course of the game as the game evolves. Now, the players of the game are not playing the individual nations. They are, as I say, playing these shadowy figures. But each of the nations you set up with kind of city tokens and palace tokens. Some of these tokens have crowns on them, which is going to be important in the game. And you're also going to put out military units like infantry, artillery, and either 2-master or 3-master naval units. Now, at the beginning of the game, you will each have a player turn order. You'll have tokens. You'll take a setup card, which will tell you essentially which cards from which nations every player is going to take, according to player count. So you're going to start with a number of influence in certain countries. Now, whoever has the most influence at a country at a certain time will take the monarch tile. And this means that they kind of have the first opportunity to actually control that country. But they won't necessarily do that. What you're going to do then on your turn is any country that you have the monarch tile for, or if you have appropriate influence at the right time, you can go ahead and take an action for one of those countries. And there are different actions that you can take. Now, if you take the build action, you take the yellow marker and you put it in the action space on the flag space on the board. And this allows you to either build or upgrade. You can build a city, you can upgrade a city, you can upgrade a palace. And then once you've done that, you can go ahead and put out units. I believe you can put 1 military unit in each city that you have, or you can put 3 into 1 location. Each unit that you build must match the type of unit that you can produce in that city. Next, with the blue marker, you can move and fight. What that means is you can move all of your naval units, and then you can move all of your land units. Now, whenever your unit gets into the same location with another unit of the same type of an enemy's, they're kind of destroyed on a 1-for-1 basis. So it's pretty much deterministic combat here. But every area that you move into that is unoccupied or occupied rather only by your troops, you can then go ahead and lay down one of your flags. And this is going to be important too for scoring. Now, with the black cube, you can do an attack action. And what you do with an attack action is you can immediately raise 2 units. You can do 2 units in 2 different cities or 2 units in 1 city, but again, they must match the specific unit type that can be produced there. And then you can immediately move those 2 units and attack with them. You can take a palace action with the white marker. This will allow you to build a palace or expand an existing palace. Palaces, a lot of them start with 2 crowns. You can expand it to 3 crowns. Then what you're going to do is, after you have built or upgraded, you're going to look at all of the crowns that you control, and rather that empire controls. And you're going to then move your power points for that empire up a number of spaces that, again, is equal to the number of crowns that that power controls. Lastly, you can take an empire action. This is with the red marker. And what you do here is you count up all of the flags that that empire has on the board. You can go ahead then and move your power points up for that empire that number of spaces. Now, occasionally, some players will find themselves without a monarch to control, in which case they can, as compensation, they can get a military unit that they want to place in any of the empires anywhere on the board. As you are taking these actions, you are sliding the markers off onto kind of this reserve board, and any markers that are on the actual board you cannot do again. You have to wait till they get to the reserve board before you can play them, which means you can't take an action 2 or 3 times in a row. You're not allowed to do that. You have to only play, as I say, from the reserve board. Now, at the end of every decade, you're going to go ahead and turn over one of the tiles. And the tiles tell you things like how you're going to gain influence. For instance, if they have the number of the player whose token matches it, they can go first in selecting any of the cards, the influence cards, to pick for themselves. And again, the higher level cards are on the top, so it's advantageous to go first. So you can get more influence with the specific empire that you want. But then in player order, players can go ahead and take those cards as well. There may be a tile that allows players to take the worker card, which again just gives you a +1, just to maybe give you a little edge in a specific empire for influence. There are also some tokens that will allow you to add infantry or ships to city spaces as well. So players are going around and around. They are manipulating the board. They are moving and attacking with units. They're planting their flags. They are building their palaces. They're building their cities. They are trying to count up their crowns, count up their flags in order to get more and more power points for the empires they have the most influence in. So this continues to go until you reach the last round. Now, once you've reached the last round, you're going to go ahead and look at all of the empires. You're going to count up all of their crowns and all of their flags, and then advance their power points. That number's on the track. Then you're going to see who is first, second, third. You're going to go ahead and see where all the empires rank, and you're going to place them on the final scoring section of the board. Now, if there's a tie, whichever player is higher in the order of the flags on the left side of the board, they will be able to break the tie. So Prussia is at top. Prussia will always win ties. Britain is at the bottom. It will always lose ties. Once you have all of those tokens in the appropriate spaces on the board, there are multipliers. And what you're going to do is you're going to look at how much influence you have for each of the empires, and you are going to multiply it by the factor printed on the board. You're going to add all of your multiplied influence that you have, and whoever has the greatest score wins. 7 empires. We'll get back to the review in just a moment. I want to take a minute to ask you to check out my other channel, that is Cody Carlson, PhD, where we talk about history, books on history, military history. I even post some of my lectures for my classes on there. Please check that out. Please subscribe to that channel. And now, back to the review. All right, 7 empires. This is a game that I'd heard a lot about for a while. I'd seen it here and there, and I was curious about it. I wanted to see more. I'd see it here and there, I should say, and I wanted to see more about it. I wanted to learn more about it, and finally, I saw enough that I think this could be a fun game. And I reached out to the good people at Rio Grande Games, and they sent me a copy. And so we set it up, and I got to tell you, this is a game I kind of didn't know really what to expect. Now, I like Maps of Europe game. I like 17th century or 18th century games, and so I was thinking, okay, this looks like something I'll enjoy. Well, we got it out there, and I was a bit confused with some of the setup. Some of it was not as intuitive as I was thinking it would be from reading the rules. But we went ahead, we got it, and we started. And it took us about maybe 2 rounds before everything clicked. Everybody got it. So a small learning curve, but then it was pretty clear what was going on. I think there were 1 or 2 rules early on we were kind of struggling with or misconceived, but then we figured it out relatively quickly. So the game is a game, again, where you are not playing the nations. You are just somebody who may have influence in a lot of nations. And so when you're picking those cards and those opportunities to pick the cards, you're essentially thinking to yourself, who am I investing in? Which nation do I think is going to succeed, get the highest score? And do I want to hedge my bet, maybe get some smaller cards in some of these other places that I think might do well as well, just so I can get some points off of them. So that's a very interesting idea here. Thematically, the whole thing reminds me very much of A War of Whispers, which is, again, a game I just played fairly recently again. I played War of Whispers years ago when it first came out. I played it many times since, and I just reviewed the new collector's edition. And both games do have this kind of conceit where you are trying to bet on who's going to win, and then you can take turns manipulating the board. I love A War of Whispers. I think A War of Whispers is fantastic. And A War of Whispers is a pretty quick game. It plays in about 60 minutes, and it's pretty intense. And I like how you're trying to see, you don't know who your allies and enemies are going to be in that game. Now, Seven Empires, as I say, is very similar to that concept, but there are significant differences. And one of the biggest differences here is your influence is out there for everyone to see. In War of Whispers, you can go the whole game without revealing who you're backing. If you do a switch in War of Whispers, you have to reveal some tokens, right? But here, from the get-go, everybody can see where everybody is going to score, what nations they're rooting for, essentially, here. Initially, I was kind of worried about that, but it works here. I think I did miss that kind of slow revelation of who was working in whose interest that you get from War of Whispers. But this has kind of a different kind of cutthroat quality to it. So I really enjoyed that as well. It's fun to, as I say, manipulate these countries, even though they're not necessarily who you are. You do have the monarch cards, which give you a lot of power over them, but they can switch, they can move out as people gain more influence in a territory, in a kingdom, in an empire. And so I like that. I like how the monarch cards aren't static, and you're not just have those, and you kind of compete for those too, and you kind of compete to get more influence in the different regions. And you don't know who's going to get the opportunities to do that effectively, because you don't know the orders at which people can select new influence cards will come. I also really, really, really liked the action selection in this game. I like this idea of you've got the flags off to the side with the markers, and you take an action, and then that action is going to be on that board for a couple of turns before it goes off, and you can do it again. And so that, because you may have an empire pop up that you really want to manipulate, but you can't do the kind of manipulation you want to do. So you may have to take a different action with them or something else. And that makes a lot of sense too, because if you go out and you spread early and you got a lot of flags out there, you'd just be doing empire the whole time to get more and more power points. So that's really cool. I really like the action selection here. I'll tell you right now, this is an excellent game. This is really, really fun. My friends and I all got a huge kick out of this one, and I wasn't sure that was going to be the case going into it. And I'm kind of upset. I've had this one for a few weeks, and I've tried to get it to the table, and I haven't been able to, and I finally did, and now I'm kicking myself, because this was one I wished I'd gotten to the table a little bit earlier. And it's one that I think, having now played it and experienced it, I don't know why people aren't talking about it more online, because it's just great. It is incredibly, incredibly fun. I think some of my friends told me they actually liked this better than A War of Whispers. I don't know. I got to play this one some more to, I think, really make that distinction. But I'll tell you this right now, it's certainly in the same league. On the Cody scale, I'm going to give Seven Empires an 8 out of 10. With more play, I could see this becoming a 9. It's fantastic. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you once again for joining us today on The Discriminating Gamer. As always, we'd ask you to please leave a comment for us here on YouTube, on Board Game Geek, on our Facebook page, on X. We really love to hear from you. I'd also ask you to go ahead and check out my other channel, that is Cody Carlson, PhD, where we talk about military history, books on history, fun things like that. And if you do really enjoy the content you see here on The Discriminating Gamer, I would humbly ask you to click on the Super Thanks button and leave a tip. You know, the local mortician passed away today, but he'll be back at work tomorrow. Zach, man, wait a second. Isn't the whole point of having a secret identity so that people don't know who you are?
Don't read too much into it, Cody. Besides, my nemesis is out there.
Your nemesis? What are you talking about?
Anti-Zach Man.